Okay, on today's video, we're going to talk about negative keywords. How to set up a negative keyword strategy that works for your business. That's going to be able to do a lot better than the current negative keyword strategy that you have right now. And if you don't really know too much about negative keywords, I'm going to tell you everything you basically need to know, the most important stuff that you should know about negative keywords so that you can get actual great results from your campaigns, as far as, of course, you could know and get from the aspect of adding negative keywords to your account. I have a list of things that I want to cover with you today. The first of which I just wanted to, on my list, make sure that you know that you're not the only one. I'd say 80-90% of people are dealing with their negative keywords right now, given I look over dozens of accounts a year and have seen hundreds of accounts in the last few years. What people are typically doing, which if you want to outdo them, what you do here, if you do this, you're going to outdo 99% of people without working too hard at it either. And and the stuff that they're doing, why it really, I don't want to say it won't give you any results, but it's like you're barely scratching the surface. But also sometimes at worst, when you have no strategy, no plan, no system, you can have what are called negative keyword conflicts, where certain keywords won't even, your ads will not trigger for certain keywords anymore. That's common. Either completely, where you'll get a warning in your Google Ads account, but also partially. So sometimes it could partially knock out a keyword that's profitable, and it may not even throw a warning. I've seen that. You could see that when you play around with the negative keywords in the search impression share specifically, which is how many times your ads show up, as well as like the amount of impressions that you're getting. But for the most part, that's a minor side issue, as is you need to have a good strategy in place in order to get good results from the keywords that you do select in terms of weeding out the garbage. That's 90% of what negative keywords are about. You could really screw up your account when you get the conflicts, even a little bit of conflicts, like I said. But both of the strategy and system that I use, which is what I'm giving you here today, is going to avoid the bad and get all the good out of these negative keywords. Set yourself up for that. But you have to put a little bit of extra work. What most people think about negative keywords, for number one here, in terms of what they actually do and what I've seen, just so that you know, people randomly check their search terms report, their Google rep. First of all, people don't even know about negative keywords starting out, because it's not clear until you click around the account and you see it. Or if you don't know what it is, maybe you'll see negative keywords and go, what the heck is that? If you work with an ad rep, but sometimes in the beginning when people are just starting out, they fall for that. Watch my video about Google reps. They can help you. Don't ban me, Google, but it gives you a little bit too much confidence, and it's just a starting point. Okay, they can help you so far, but not all the way. They'll show you how to do negative keywords, and that is, they'll go into the search terms report, which is actually not your keywords. This is different. What people type in physically that triggers or the ad, and before people actually click on the ad. So you got keywords, which is what you bid on, and then what people type in physically, which can be close to the keywords, are the search terms. And so you go into that list of things that people typed in, and you find out what people are typing in that are irrelevant, and ultimately that if that person, when they clicked on it, was a waste of your money, so you can filter it out in the future. But they'll go to the search terms report, and there's a way to click the checkbox next to each search term, and it says click to add, and then you click submit, and then that'll be all your negative keywords added at the ad group level. They won't show up again for those same keywords that directly. And that's about as far as people go. There's no actual system or strategy or rhyme or reason to what they're doing beyond that, and that is because I can't blame people. They don't really. When you only work on one account, that is your own. I mean, you can't. You have to read all this information in order to know about stuff like this. And plus you have to have an opportunity to test it out. The average person doesn't stand a chance anymore against somebody who does this full time. It's just not reasonable. It's almost like if you wanted to do your own legal work and you're going to go up and get somebody that has a legal team working for there, it's like, forget about it. I mean, it's like using a pea shooter going into a fight with somebody who has a 12-gauge shotgun. Not saying that you can't learn how to be a really good PPC person or strategist, which this whole channel is about. If you just studied my strategies, learned them, executed them, you would be better than 95+% of people. It just takes a lot of time and effort. You got to be dedicated to the process, but you can make millions of dollars from your ads just by learning the stuff that nobody else is willing to do or don't know, which if you go beyond what everybody else is willing to do and know how to do it, that's all really it takes to make millions of dollars from your PPC ads in your space and take that number 1 or 2 slot where that ultimately I'd say 80% of the money is made in most niches. But anyway, going back to this, so you know now what people normally do. Now, how to build a negative keyword strategy here that can double your ROI. For the most part, just looking back at our notes, I want to say in this opportunities where all we did starting out for a client is adding the negative keywords, we about doubled the ROI just from that one activity. If we're talking about crap strategy compared to good strategy that we're using here, average strategy I should say, and the strategy we're using here, so you kind of know what the impact short term of this could be. But so it's really a big part of just getting good results out of an account anyway. But anyway, besides that, so to have a background and to understand the strategy I'm about to give you here, you have to have a background about negative keywords, about other a glossary, if you will, of different attributes or things you could do with negative keywords here in terms of applying them to your account and get the results that you want. There are different types of negative keywords, if you will. There's a ad group level negative keywords, which I mentioned up here is what most people do when they go to the search terms report and click on the box and click ad. You have campaign level negative keywords, and then you have account level negative keywords, which isn't an official word or anything, but it's something that I've coined for it, and I'll explain what that is. And then of course you have these lists, which are tied to the account level keywords. And so you can think of it as like a rolling list, if you will. So it's almost like you have something that you have a high level, and then you have levels underneath it. And if you want a negative keyword applied to your whole account, well, you do it on account level. If you wanted it applied to just everything in a particular campaign, you do it campaign level. If you wanted to be applied, the negative keyword to be applied just to the ad group itself and everything in there, you do the ad group level. And if you wanted it applied to a certain keyword, you could do that too, of course. But you would have to have a campaign like the campaigns we set up here every time, because they get the best results by far, which is one keyword per ad group, which I highly recommend that you do. You can check out my other videos about that if you'd like to learn how to do that. Anyway, this is about negative keywords, so I'll keep going. Now, so now you understand. So when you make a negative keyword, or you decide to add a negative keyword to your account, you're going to have to decide which of these groups, if you will, you're going to add it to: account, ad group level, campaign level itself. Beyond that, that's not really a decision. You just needed to know that background to be able to use this strategy. The first actual step in executing the strategy that I use and learned through trial and error over the last 10 to 15 years is you're going to first decide to keep a search term that has a competitor's name or what I call an info term. So let's say you offer let's say you offer catering services. I had a client in that industry. That's why I got it off the top of my head here. Let's say, so people search for a lot of different things regarding to catering, right? You could typically what comes to your mind right off the bat in terms of thinking of catering. They could, if they were going to hire a catering company, they're going to put like catering company Denver, or catering companies near me, or catering company services, right? That's like the most relevant terms you could think of. But there's also kind of terms in the middle like how to hire a catering service, which I'm going to still group as an info term, even though, as I mentioned on other videos, that you can certainly, to expand, there's a strategy you can use to target those terms, but it'll be different. You're going to send people to content instead of your services landing page, where people just want to hire you right away, which so that you can actually convert that to profit the right way. And so anyway, what you do when you add negative keywords, you're going to look at, it's the way that I recommend you do it, you're going to look at your search terms report, and you're going to do it from all keywords in your account. And as you decide to add them, you're going to go through as you would normally think, and stuff that looks irrelevant to your service, you're going to make a list to add those. And you're going to have to make an executive decision up front, or it's much easier to, and this is a part of my system, so I recommend you do, that in terms of negative keywords, if the negative keyword or the search term itself have a competitor's name in it, are you going to keep those, or are you going to remove those? If somebody's typing in looking for information, and I'm not, again, people looking for pictures or whatever, it's easy, that remove those. But what if they're looking for pricing, or what if they're looking again, how to find the best company, best reviewed companies. Best reviewed companies is a good example, but how to hire a catering service and get the best value would still be a term. And you're going to have to decide up front if you're going to add those or remove those. That said, moving past that, now the next step is you're going to have to break your campaigns down into buying, info, and competitor variety/types. So what that means is, ultimately, which of your campaigns that you have in your account right now, are they buying terms? People looking to buy right now. Which campaigns, if you have keywords that are still targeting people that are looking like for how to hire the best company out there, what's the process that you go through, assuming that's what they're typing in, and then you're sending people to an article that educates the user in effort to monetize that traffic. You want to label those campaigns as info terms. And then if you do have a campaign that targets your competitors' names, you want to first of all, it shouldn't be grouped in with everything else, but for the most part, I'm assuming that it's not. You're going to label those competitor campaigns. And so, and same thing with the info terms. You should have the campaigns with just buying terms in it, campaigns with just info terms in it, a competitor campaigns in its own separate campaigns. But anyway, you're just going to label what campaigns are what. I recommend just doing that in the campaign name. Or you can add labels. You can check into what that is if you don't want to change your campaign names. And then beyond that, what that allows you to do is moving forward here, you're going to create a list for each one of the groups that you have just made here. So which I haven't mentioned what a negative keyword list is. So under the lists, a negative keyword list, which you could find in your account, there's a way to create a list of negative keywords so that if, let's say, you wanted to apply negative keywords to one campaign, and then you wanted to apply those same exact negative keywords to another campaign easily, you can use lists. Because under lists, you could designate which of the list that you created, which campaign should it apply to. And I believe you still can do that at an ad group level with the list as well. I always do campaign level. I never do ad group level, so I apologize if that particular aspect of the information is outdated. So that when you're looking at your search terms report, you could identify, okay, I know I don't want to have info terms, so therefore that goes into my negative list. And if you don't have any info terms, you don't need an info list. If you don't have any competitor terms, you don't need a competitors list. You'll just have one negative keywords list, by the way. But if you do have competitor campaigns and info term campaigns, well, then you have separate lists for each one of those. In that, you will have all competitor campaigns will have the competitor list you have designated assigned to those campaigns by themselves because they're their own animal. You have one list designated to all info campaigns and then one negative list for just buying campaigns. So anyway, moving forward, now that you got that, each 30 days you're going to add from the search terms report again to each list, which is automatically which automatically gets applied to each campaign. So, in other words, every 30 days is the time frame which I do negative keywords. That obviously could be shorter if you have more traffic, and longer if you have less traffic, but just as an average, it's 30 days for most campaigns that I work on. It's bound to be kind of the best sequenced or frequency to do it in. And so once every 30 days, we're going into the search terms report. We're identifying if we've already decided if we're going to kick out competitor terms and info terms. So that every time we spot one of those, it goes into our list of negative keywords to remove for all future searches, those terms. And we go ahead and add those to our lists. And again, I'm doing it at a campaign level for everything here. So I'm looking at all search terms report, the search terms report for all campaigns together. I'm not doing it on a campaign by campaign basis, because if one info term is found in one campaign, that particular same search term should be added to all other campaigns, because that's what makes sense, right? Same thing with competitors. If you don't want competitor searches to have your ads show up for competitor searches. Well, if you find it in one campaign, no, you want it applied to your whole account. That's why you do campaign level negative keyword additions through a list, which that same list is applied to all campaigns that would not, if you're talking about a negative keyword that should be for a competitor name, to all non-competitor campaigns. Or if you don't have competitor campaigns, they get applied to everything. And so every 30 days, you're going in there, which terms am I going to remove? Stuff that, so a good example, so right off the bat, this makes it easy, because once you decide this right up front, competitor, bang, info term, bang, right away, and then from there, what's left, you still have to do some deciding on what you want to remove and what you don't. And a good example on top of that is like cheap. If you don't want cheap customers and people are typing in cheap catering services, well, now to add cheap. And just as a side note about negative keywords, even though you add the word cheap, technically it's supposed to not have, you do it in a broad basis, meaning no quotes or no brackets around it, which you can do broad phrase and exact match negative keywords, that it doesn't work like you think. For the most part, the differences between those are very muddy. And just because you add a cheap as a broad match, it doesn't block everything with cheap in it from now on. It kind of does, but just don't get disappointed at your PPC person if you assign someone else to do this, that other searches for cheap show up, because it kind of blocks it, it kind of does it. What's more effective to block everything with cheap in it is to find every search term with the word cheap and then add each one of those separately. So what you're going to do is, if you identify there's terms with cheap in it, you're not only going to add cheap by itself, but every version of each keyword that's cheap as well, in phrase match, not exact match, which is why I have phrase match here. So when I'm adding these keywords to the lists that will get applied to one or more than one campaigns each, and then add terms to it each month, then I'm doing that all in phrase match, and I'm doing it on a broad basis, which those, if it's just like cheap, I am adding it as a broad match. And for the most part, I don't want to say that, I shouldn't say. For the most part, I'm doing the cheap in a phrase match, I shouldn't say. Once in a while, I'll do it in broad match, but for the most part, it's phrase match for everything. But except for if you're going to do the literal phrase, the whole thing, then that'll be an exact match. And to add to that, if it was like cheap catering services, I would add the negative keyword cheap and the negative keyword cheap catering services. And I would actually do cheap catering services in a bracket, cheap catering services in phrase match, just so that the system really knows I don't want that. There's no rhyme. That's just what I've kind of learned works the best to clear things out. And then in that particular situation, just cheap in quotes, you could go one step further and add it in cheap with no quotes by itself, which would be a broad match. But again, you have to be a little hard, because that could be the system can get confused what you mean by cheap. I want, at least if you have it in phrase match, you don't, the system will think, well, cheap actually has to be in the phrase to block it, which is what you want. It will, if you just put cheap with no quotes, it'll try to find other words meaning cheap, but then sometimes the system will get confused, and then you'll get all these weird, you'll drastically cut down on the potential of the campaigns long term by adding a lot of broad match negative keywords, and I basically would stay away from it unless you really have a big problem with cheap customers coming in, let's say. Then that might be a one way to remedy things. But anyway, that's what you do as the last step. Now, a couple other things to know. Exceptions. Every 6 months, you're going to add ad group level terms with more than 1,000 clicks since start to your negative keywords list. So this is where ad group level keywords come in. So as I mentioned, you use lists to do campaign level negative keywords, and you're going to apply the same lists broken up into these 3 categories to all the campaigns in your account. Now on top of that, you're going to add ad group level keywords. In terms of those, every 6 months you're going to go into the search terms report in every ad group in the account, specifically because this takes more data. Anything that's had since the very start of the campaign that you've set up, however long it takes for a certain exact search phrase to get 1,000 searches, if after 1,000 searches it's 20% at the bottom 20% of the cost per conversions the account is getting, or the bottom 20% of the ROI, if it's in the bottom 20%, I'm clicking the checkbox to add it to that particular ad group and just removing it. If there's more than one keyword in that particular ad group, of course. If you're using one ad group per keyword in that case, and you add that negative search term, it may block everything, but at the same time anymore, even if you have exact match keywords, it's not going to be just that keyword in itself. It's going to be close to, because they've changed things recently. So still, ultimately what this is doing for you is it's just the bottom 20% of the account, you're constantly just cleaning that out so that not only does the ROI get better, but then on top of that, you add in new campaign creation. You find new display campaigns, new strategies to use, and you're taking the 20% of the crap part of the account and just getting rid of it so that you have an opportunity to try something else, if you will. And that's what PPC is about, really. You use all your conversion data to bid more or less, but on top for each keyword, for each time of the day people are searching, for each day of the week that they're searching, what state they're in, so on and so forth. But at the same time, I also, on top of that, through bid adjustments across the account, every metric that they allow it on, I'm cutting out search terms that are at the bottom 20% of the pile. On top of that, one other thing to know, use a thesaurus for all synonyms. So in other words, going back to like the example with cheap I gave you before, once you find a negative keyword cheap in your search terms report, let's say you find in the search terms report cheap catering services, and you know, crap, I don't want anybody that wants cheap services. So you'll add that search term by itself as a negative keyword in your list. Then you're going to add just the word cheap in your list. On top of that, what you really should do, which I left out before, but I wanted to save it to last, you're going to get out the thesaurus and you're going to start adding every other negative keyword that means the exact same as cheap that you think that'll apply, which is why you're not going to add cheap as a broad match negative keyword. Instead of letting Google figure out what cheap means, you're going to go and manually find all the words that mean cheap that you know mean cheap. And so what you're trying to do each month, basically, as you're going through the search terms report, is you're using the data that's there to add negatives, but you're using it as ideas. Find all the, oh crap, I didn't know people were searching for cheap. Or, oh crap, I didn't know they were searching for pictures. Okay, well, I'm going to go look at the thesaurus for anything else that means pictures. And I'm going to find all those, and then I'm going to add those as well. So going back to the cheap example, after adding quotes around cheap, to add a phrase match negative keyword there, I'm adding low cost inexpensive. You get the idea, general idea there. And by the way, as another also side note for a little extra credit here, you can actually find lists out there. If you don't have one, I could give you one that has all the common negative terms that you normally would want if you don't have any campaigns targeting info terms. Pictures, schools, PDFs, all this stuff where people are looking for information, the most common ones that I've compiled over years that I add as a negative list that I add to all buyers campaigns that I have in the account, or it might be the whole account, of course, because they're all buyers campaigns, as well as adding that to the competitors campaign. And as a side note there, by the way, your negative negative keywords list dedicated for info, you'll apply that to your buyers campaigns and your competitors campaigns. And your competitors negative list you'll apply to your info campaigns and your buyers campaigns. And so you get what I mean there. So you'll use the negative, so each one of the three groups will be applied to the other two groups, if you will, of campaigns. Just want to clear that up as well. So apart from that, and as far as the secondary adding of negative keywords to each ad group, those negative keywords that you're going to add is going to be in what I do an exact match. So once something's got 1,000 searches, it's clear that it's in the bottom 20% of performance in the account. I'm adding that as an exact match, only because we know that that exact term isn't doing well, but something very close to it, we don't know yet. If something is very close to it and gets 1,000 searches, or just prevalent enough to get 1,000 searches, we can make the same judgment call, but we're going to do it on each exact search phrase in there. Now, obviously, not very many search phrases get 1,000 clicks, but of the ones that do, we want to make a judgment call to get rid of the bottom 20% of those right away, and then you apply it to the ad group so that, that it wouldn't be applied to all other ad groups. We technically could do that, but that's not the way I do it. I add it just to that ad group because that's the ad group that usually triggers most of it to get 1,000 searches. Most of it's going through that particular ad group. But if you add it there, it might pop up somewhere else if the rest of your account's not structured that well. So you could technically add it to all the other ad groups and all the other ad groups in the account that you have for good measure if your account's really messy, if you will. But I don't, because usually we don't have that much trouble with that because the campaigns are structured very well, so on and so forth. And the last thing I mentioned up here was once a month for all keywords. So again, like I said before, at the ad group level where you're adding search terms that got searched at least 1,000 times from the start of launching the campaign and reached the bottom 20% of ROI, either cost per conversion for lead generation accounts or ROI for e-commerce accounts, then we're adding that, and we're doing that once a month. So, or excuse me, okay, sorry, I messed up here. So you do that every 6 months. Sorry, I got confused here for a minute with my notes here. Every 6 months, you're going to check and there'll be some that now have at least 1,000. So you go through every ad group and make sure of the ones that got at least 1,000 in that last 6 months, that now finally broke the mark of 1,000, you're going to make a judgment call on those. Bottom 20% you add, the rest you leave it. And as you go forward, the ones that still have over 1,000, maybe it was good for you right away, and then later on, sometimes you'll just find out that it is in the bottom 20%, then you can add it, just as a side note. But the same kind of system, this is a final note about all this, that I also do, is the keywords themselves, I do the same kind of thing. But on a once a month schedule, I'll look at the keywords themselves. And I know this is related to negative keywords, but once a month, I'll actually look at the keywords themselves in the bottom 20% on a new campaign, probably for the first year. We're going to shut off the bottom 20% of the keywords in terms of once it gets 1,000 clicks. If it isn't getting, if it has a bottom 20% of ROI, or essentially it has 1,000 impressions and it hasn't had any clicks, then at either one, we're pausing that keyword out. So that's just a kind of a similar system to adding the search terms, the negative terms to that same ad group as negative terms. So that same campaign will just get more and more and more pruned, to a degree, of course, so that you're left with maybe, 2/3 of that particular new campaign you started with, but you got rid of the bottom 20% of it. So therefore, the overall, in terms of the quality score system and everything, you might have a campaign that produces 2 to 3 times better than it started out day one, of course, or maybe even a little more once the quality scores have gotten calculated in and you've gotten rid of the worst crap, which will also help the quality scores, because there's a such thing as an account level quality score, and having the bottom 20% in there will affect everything else, which is why you want to prune it out. So anyway, that's the video about negative keywords, what I do for our accounts, and potentially or very well could double your ROI on your current account if you're not doing really much with negative keywords right now, or a varying level of if you're doing a little bit more than the bare minimum I talked about most people do. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe. There is a lot of other PPC money-making strategies just like this, free strategies I'm giving you on this channel. When a new video comes out, I'll give you an alert. If you subscribe, of course, the system will. If you also want to have step-by-step instructions on how to do stuff just like this for your company, the way that I've figured out how to do it the last 15 years, and for our clients in which we got to guarantee their results before getting paid, you can go ahead and go to our site at guaranteeppc.com/blog, and you'll get that kind of level of information there as well. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions about negative keywords, anything that I didn't cover or was unclear, leave a comment down below. I will get back to you and give you some free advice as well, or at least put you back on the right track if I can. Thanks.